He fired me on a Tuesday morning, right before I was supposed to transfer the data to my handler. He didn't know the USB I'd left in my desk drawer had already triggered a domino effect that would bring the FBI crashing through his office door 48 hours later. I'm an undercover agent. I don't need a reason to be hated, but I do need a reason to take down those who think they're above the law. My name is Riley Thorne, and I've been living a lie for the past 6 months. At 34, I've spent the better part of a decade working for the Internal Oversight Bureau, a federal agency most people don't even know exists. We're the ones who investigate corruption from the inside out, the ghosts who slip into organizations and become part of the furniture until we find what we're looking for. This time, they sent me to Vanguard Parallax, a private security firm operating out of Montreal, Nevada. On paper, it looked clean enough. Government contracts, corporate clients, the usual roster of ex-military personnel providing consulting services. But our intelligence suggested something darker: money laundering, illegal arms dealing, and classified defense technology being sold to the highest bidder. I arrived in Montreal on a sweltering June morning. The town was exactly what you'd expect from a dying industrial hub: empty storefronts, crumbling infrastructure, and that particular brand of desperation that hangs in the air when the biggest employer in town holds all the cards. Vanguard Parallax occupied a gleaming glass building on the outskirts, a monument to corporate power in a place where power meant everything. My cover was solid. The IOB had spent months crafting my identity as a financial data analyst with a spotless resume and glowing recommendations from companies that existed only in carefully maintained databases. I interviewed twice, once over video, once in person, before they offered me the position. The hiring manager seemed almost relieved to have found someone qualified willing to relocate to Montreal. My first day. I met Marcus Delane. The CEO was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of calculated charm that made you want to check your wallet after shaking his hand. He gave me the tour himself, which should have been my first warning. CEOs don't usually waste time on mid-level analysts unless they have something to prove or something to hide. "Welcome to the family," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "At Vanguard, we value loyalty above all else. I'm sure you'll fit right in." The way he said loyalty made my skin crawl. My direct supervisor was Shayla Vex, a woman who could have been beautiful if she hadn't weaponized every aspect of her appearance: sharp suits, sharper heels, and a smile that could cut glass. She ran the financial analysis department with an iron fist wrapped in manicured nails. "I don't tolerate mistakes," she told me on my first day, standing behind my desk close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. "And I definitely don't tolerate questions. You do your job, you keep your head down, and we'll get along just fine." The office culture was toxic in ways that went beyond typical corporate dysfunction. Employees spoke in whispers. Meetings ended abruptly when certain people entered the room, and everyone seemed to be watching everyone else. Security cameras covered every angle, and our computers were monitored to an extent that would make the NSA jealous. But I was good at this game. I'd played it before in a dozen different offices, wearing a dozen different masks. I became Riley the reliable analyst, Riley who arrived early and stayed late, Riley who never asked uncomfortable questions, even as she quietly documented every irregularity she found. And there were so many irregularities. Shell companies in Eastern Europe receiving monthly transfers, defense contracts with dollar amounts that didn't match the services provided, shipping manifests for equipment that never seemed to arrive at its stated destination. I photographed documents during my lunch breaks, memorized account numbers while pretending to reconcile spreadsheets, and slowly built a case that would bring this whole operation crashing down. All I had to do was stay invisible long enough to gather what we needed. I thought I was being careful. I thought I was smarter than them. I was wrong. The Vanguard Parallax office was a study in contradictions. State-of-the-art technology housed in a building where the air conditioning worked only when it felt like it. Executive suites with Italian leather furniture while the break room coffee maker had been broken for 3 months. It was as if all the money flowing through this place never quite made it to the things that mattered for the people who actually worked here. Montreal itself was dying a slow death. The unemployment rate hovered around 18%, and Vanguard was one of the only games in town paying above minimum wage. This gave them leverage, the kind that turns employees into prisoners. People put up with the surveillance, the arbitrary rules, the sudden terminations, because where else would they go? I watch colleagues get fired for infractions as minor as taking too long in the bathroom or questioning a policy during a meeting. One analyst, Janet, was escorted out by security because she'd accidentally CC'd the wrong person on an email. She'd worked there for 7 years. They gave her 15 minutes to pack her desk while 2 guards watched. "That's what happens when you're careless," Shayla had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Attention to detail is everything here. The fear was palpable. People ate lunch at their desks rather than risk being seen as not committed. Conversations died when managers walked by. Even the janitors moved through the building like ghosts, careful not to make eye contact with anyone above their pay grade. But fear made people sloppy. And sloppy people made mistakes I could exploit. I discovered the real dirt 3 months in. While reconciling accounts, I found a pattern of transfers that didn't match any legitimate business purpose. Money would come in from government contracts, get shuffled through 3 or 4 internal accounts, then disappear into shell companies registered in Moldova, Belarus, and Montenegro. Classic washing machine operation. But with a twist, the amounts were always just below federal reporting thresholds. Then there were the shipping records. Vanguard was moving cargo labeled as consulting materials and training equipment, but the weights and customs codes didn't match. Cross-referencing with our legitimate military contracts, I realized they were selling surplus defense tech, the kind of equipment that wasn't supposed to leave the country, let alone end up in Eastern European black markets. Marcus Delane wasn't just running a corrupt company, he was running a treasonous one. The deeper I dug, the more paranoid the atmosphere became. Shayla started scheduling performance reviews for random employees, which were really interrogations about their loyalty and whether they'd noticed anything unusual. 2 people from IT were fired after she found out they'd been discussing the company's server security over drinks. "Loose lips sink ships," she announced at our next department meeting, her predatory smile scanning the room. "And this ship has no room for rats." I kept my head down and my mouth shut, but I could feel the walls closing in. Every document I photographed, every file I copied felt like a risk. The security team had started doing random bag checks at the exit. It pushed a software update that tracked our every keystroke. Even the bathroom stalls had started to feel like they had eyes. The office operated on a system of unspoken rules. Never question a superior's decision. Never access files outside your assigned projects. Never discuss company business outside the building. Never show any sign of disloyalty. Breaking any of these rules meant immediate termination, or worse. Rumors circulated about former employees who'd tried to blow the whistle and found themselves facing lawsuits, bankruptcy, or mysterious accidents. Marcus had built more than a criminal enterprise. He'd built a kingdom where he was the absolute monarch, and everyone else existed at his pleasure. The legitimate employees were human shields, giving the operation a veneer of respectability while the real business happened in locked offices and encrypted communications. Shayla was his enforcer, maintaining order through a combination of intimidation and selective rewards. Those who proved their loyalty got bonuses, promotions, and most importantly, job security. Those who showed even a hint of independent thinking found themselves on the street. I'd infiltrated dangerous operations before, but there was something particularly insidious about Vanguard. It wasn't just the crimes, it was the way they'd normalized them, turned corruption into corporate culture. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one dared say it out loud. As I sat at my desk that Thursday afternoon, preparing another report for my handler, I had no idea that my time was already running out. The predators had caught the scent of prey. And I was about to learn that in Montreal, Nevada, loyalty wasn't just valued, it was enforced. The mistake that would cost me everything was laughably small. A single encrypted file, sent through what I thought was a secure channel at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I'd stayed late, waiting for the office to empty before transmitting my weekly report to my handler. The cleaning crew had passed through an hour earlier, and even Shayla's office light had finally gone dark. I should have known better. At Vanguard, the walls had eyes even when the lights were off. The next morning, I could feel the shift in atmosphere the moment I badged in. The security guard held my ID a beat too long, studying my face like he was memorizing it. The receptionist, usually chatty, didn't make eye contact. As I walked to my desk, conversations stopped mid-sentence. My computer took longer than usual to boot up. When it finally did, I noticed subtle changes. Files had been accessed, timestamps altered in ways that suggested someone had been digging through my work. Professional paranoia kicked in, but I forced myself to act normal, pulling up spreadsheets and beginning my daily routine. At 10 a.m., an emergency department meeting was called. Shayla stood at the front of the conference room, her expression unreadable. "It's come to our attention that someone in this department has been violating our security protocols," she announced, her voice cutting through the silence. "Unauthorized transmissions were detected from our servers last night." My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral, matching the worried expressions of my colleagues. "Our IT team is conducting a full investigation," she continued. "In the meantime, all external communications will be monitored even more closely. If anyone has information about suspicious activity, my door is open." Her eyes swept the room, lingering on each face. When they reached mine, I met her gaze steadily, projecting the same mix of concern and confusion as everyone else. The meeting ended, but the real interrogation was just beginning. Throughout the day, Shayla appeared at random moments, standing behind my chair to watch me work, asking casual questions about my previous employers, wondering aloud about my reasons for moving to Montreal. "It's such a small town," she mused, perching on the edge of my desk. "Not much here for a single woman, no family, no connections. What made you choose us?" I gave her the rehearsed answer about wanting a fresh start, seeking stability, appreciating the opportunity. She nodded, but her smile was sharp as a blade. That afternoon, Marcus himself paid a visit to our department. He rarely ventured down from the executive floor, and his presence sent ripples of anxiety through the cubicles. He made small talk with a few employees before stopping at my desk. "Riley, isn't it?" His voice was warm, but his eyes were cold. "Shayla tells me you're doing excellent work, very thorough, very detailed." "Thank you, Mr. Delane. I try to be comprehensive in my analyses." "Comprehensive?" "Yes." He picked up a framed photo from my desk, a fake family photo the IOB had provided for my cover. "Beautiful family. They must miss you, being so far away." "We video chat every week." I lied smoothly. He set the photo down, slightly askew. "Family is everything, don't you think? Loyalty to those we trust, those who trust us. It's what separates us from animals." The threat was subtle, but clear. I straightened the photo after he left, my hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Over the next 2 days, the scrutiny intensified. My badge access to certain areas was revoked pending system updates. My computer login was mysteriously suspended twice, requiring IT intervention. Shayla assigned me to work with another analyst, ostensibly for collaboration, but really to have someone watching my every move. Then came the IT audit. 2 technicians appeared at my desk Friday morning, informing me they needed to perform a routine security check on my workstation. I watched as they combed through my files, checked my browser history, examined my email cache. They found nothing because I'd been careful, but I could see the frustration in their eyes. That afternoon, Shayla called me into her office. Marcus was there, sitting behind her desk while she stood guard by the door. "We've been reviewing your employment history," Marcus said without preamble. "Some interesting gaps, some references that seem difficult to reach." The IOB had built my cover identity carefully, but no cover could withstand intense scrutiny forever. phone numbers that rang to voicemail too often, former employers who gave vague, scripted references, an address history that looked solid on paper but fell apart when you started knocking on doors. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, maintaining my composure. "No." Marcus leaned back in the chair. "Tell me, Riley, in your previous position at Steinberg Financial, who was your direct supervisor?" I gave him the name the IOB had provided, but I could see he already knew it was fake. They'd done their homework, peeled back the layers of my identity like an onion. "We value trust here," Shayla said from behind me. "And right now, we're having a hard time trusting you." The game was up, but I couldn't break character, not yet. I needed to get back to my desk, needed to ensure the USB drive I'd hidden was still there. It contained everything: account numbers, transaction records, shipping manifests, enough evidence to bury them all. "I understand your concerns," I said carefully. "If there's anything I can clarify, we'll let you know," Marcus interrupted, standing up. "For now, return to your desk. We'll be in touch." As I walked back through the cubicle farm, I knew my time at Vanguard was measured in hours, not days. The only question was whether I'd gathered enough evidence to make it count. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp Nevada air that should have meant a fresh start. Instead, I walked into Vanguard knowing it would likely be my last day. The weekend had given them time to dig deeper into my background, and I'd spent those 48 hours backing up everything I could to the hidden USB drive. The office was quieter than usual. My badge worked at the front entrance, but I noticed my parking spot, the one I'd used for 6 months, had been reassigned. Small humiliations designed to telegraph what was coming. At my desk, I found my computer already logged in, desktop cleared of all personal files. My access to the financial systems had been revoked. The message was clear: I was already a ghost in their system. At 9:15 a.m., Shayla appeared at my cubicle. No greeting, no pretense of normalcy. "Conference room 3, now." I stood, sliding my hand casually along the underside of my desk drawer as I pushed my chair in. The USB drive was still there, held in place by industrial tape. My insurance policy, waiting to be discovered. The conference room was small, windowless, designed for privacy. Shayla had positioned herself between me and the door. A security guard stood just outside, visible through the glass panel, arms crossed, ready. "Sit," she commanded. I took the chair facing her, maintaining eye contact. In my experience, the guilty look away, the innocent get angry, the trained operative stays calm. "We've completed our investigation into your background," she began, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Would you like to explain why Steinberg Financial has no record of you ever working there?" "There must be some mistake. Cut the bullshit." Her mask of corporate professionalism finally slipped, revealing the predator beneath. "We know you're not who you say you are. The only question is whether you're a corporate spy, a federal agent, or just a very sophisticated thief." I let confusion and indignation play across my face. "This is insane. I've been nothing but loyal to this company." "Loyalty?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want to talk about loyalty? Marcus gave you an opportunity, brought you into our family. And this is how you repay him?" She opened the folder, revealing printed screenshots of my falsified employment history, highlighted inconsistencies in my resume, phone records showing the numbers I'd listed as references, all routing to the same VoIP service. "Your performance has been exemplary," she continued, her voice dripping sarcasm. "Too exemplary. No one is that perfect unless they're trying to hide something." "I need this job," I said, letting desperation creep into my voice. "Whatever you think I've done." "What you've done is violate the trust of this organization, and that's unforgivable." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. You have 10 minutes. You can't just... Actually, we can... Nevada is an at-will employment state. We don't need a reason. But lucky for you, we have several." She moved to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. A word of advice: leave Montreal tonight. This is a small town, and word travels fast about people who can't be trusted. The security guard entered as she left, his expression professionally neutral. Ma'am, if you'll come with me. The walk to my desk felt like a perp walk. Colleagues averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their screens. The few who did look up showed a mix of pity and relief, there but for the grace of God. I packed slowly, methodically, a coffee mug, a fake photo of my fake family, a stress ball I'd never used. The guard watched every movement, occasionally directing me away from drawers that contain company property. I need my personal notebook, I said, reaching for my locked drawer. All contents of that drawer have been designated company property. He replied, perfect. They'd find the USB drive eventually, but not immediately. By the time they realized what they had, it would be too late. As I placed my meager possessions in a cardboard box, I felt Shayla watching from her office doorway. Marcus had appeared too, standing on the mezzanine level like a king surveying his domain. The entire office held its breath, witnessing another execution of someone who'd violated their twisted code. Your final paycheck will be mailed, the guard informed me as we reached the exit. Your badge has been deactivated. Any attempt to return to the premises will be considered trespassing. I turned for one last look at the gleaming fortress of Vanguard Parallax. Through the glass, I could see normal people returning to their normal crimes, assured that the threat to their corrupt ecosystem had been eliminated. Understood, I said, shifting the box to one hip. As I walked to my car, I didn't look back. Didn't need to. I knew Shayla would search my desk within the hour, her obsessive need for control compelling her to look for any evidence I might have gathered. She'd find the USB drive, hidden but not too hidden. Password protected but not too protected. She'd plug it in, thinking she'd discovered my secret cache. She had no idea she was about to light a fuse that would blow her entire world apart. The drive contained everything the FBI needed: financial records, communication logs, shipping manifests, even recorded conversations I'd managed to capture. But more importantly, it contained a tracking program that would activate the moment someone accessed the files, sending a signal straight to the IOB. As I drove away from Montreal, my hands were steady on the wheel. I'd lost the job, but I'd won the war. Marcus Delane and Shayla Vex thought they'd protected their empire by casting me out. They'd learn soon enough that some enemies are more dangerous when you push them away. 48 hours. That's all it would take. The drive from Montreal to Denver took 12 hours, but I made it in 10. Every mile I put between myself and Vanguard felt like shedding skin, leaving Riley the analyst behind and becoming myself again. By the time I reached the IOB field office, the sun was setting behind the Rockies, painting the sky the color of old blood. My handler, Special Agent David Park, was waiting in the debriefing room. His expression told me everything. The tracker had activated. They accessed the drive 3 hours ago, he said without preamble. Multiple copies made to their internal servers. They're trying to crack the encryption as we speak. I sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting me like a wave. They'll manage it. I made sure the encryption was strong enough to look legitimate, but weak enough for their IT team to break within 24 hours. You're betting they won't run? Marcus Delane doesn't run. He's spent years building his kingdom in Montreal. He thinks he's untouchable. I accepted the coffee Park offered, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. Besides, running would mean admitting guilt. He'll try to destroy the evidence first, discredit me, maybe even file charges against me for corporate espionage. Park pulled up surveillance feeds on his laptop. Vanguard's parking lot. Aerial views of Delane's mansion. Shayla's downtown apartment. We've got eyes on all primary targets. The moment they crack that encryption and see what's inside, they'll panic, I finished. Marcus will call an emergency meeting. Shayla will start shredding documents. It will begin wiping servers. They'll create so much suspicious activity that even a rookie agent could build a case. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. The USB drive wasn't just evidence, it was bait. Every file was carefully chosen to reveal just enough of their operation to terrify them into making mistakes. financial records that led to offshore accounts, shipping manifests with enough details to suggest weapons trafficking, communications that implicated a dozen smaller players in their network. Hour by hour, we watched them unravel. Surveillance showed Shayla arriving at the office at 3 a.m. Wednesday morning, hauling boxes of documents to her car. Marcus held a video conference with someone in Belarus at 4 a.m., his body language growing increasingly agitated. Their IT director was spotted at a 24-hour electronics store buying industrial-strength hard drive shredders. "They're destroying evidence," Park observed, unable to hide his satisfaction. "In full view of our surveillance teams." But the real gift came Wednesday afternoon. In their panic to eliminate digital traces, Vanguard's IT team made a critical error. They tried to wipe their backup servers remotely, triggering an automated failsafe that instead backed up everything to a cloud service, one the IOB had been monitoring since I'd identified it months earlier. Terabytes of data flooded into our servers. 5 years of criminal activity, preserved in pristine detail by their own security protocols. "Holy shit," Park breathed, watching the files populate. This is everything. Arms deals, money laundering, bribery, even a few assassinations dressed up as accidents. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You clever bitch." Shayla had figured it out. Too late. Thursday morning, 5:47 a.m. I stood in the FBI command vehicle parked 2 blocks from Vanguard Parallax, wearing tactical gear instead of business casual. The warrant had been signed by a federal judge at midnight. Teams were positioned at the office, Delane's home, Shayla's apartment, and a dozen other locations across 3 states. "You don't have to be here for this," the lead FBI agent said. "Your part's done. With respect, I've earned the right to see this through." He nodded, understanding. "Stay behind the tactical team, and try not to smile too much when we perp walk them out." The countdown began in my earpiece, synchronized raids, designed to prevent anyone from warning the others. I thought about all the employees who'd been terrorized, fired, threatened into silence, the contracts that had put dangerous weapons in the wrong hands, the money that had flowed to terrorists and cartels while Delane played respectable businessman. "All teams, we are green light. I repeat, green light." The tactical team moved like water, flowing around the building's corners and through its doors. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering despite my training. This was the moment 6 months of lies had built toward. The front doors exploded inward. Federal agents flooded the lobby, weapons drawn, voices commanding compliance. The security guard who'd escorted me out just 2 days ago hit the ground, hands behind his head. I entered behind the main wave, taking in the chaos. Employees emerging from cubicles, hands raised, faces shocked. Federal agents securing computers, boxing documents, taking control of servers still warm from the failed purge attempt. And then I saw her, Shayla, being led out of her office in handcuffs. Her perfect composure finally shattered. Her silk blouse was wrinkled, her hair disheveled from what had clearly been a sleepless night of trying to cover their tracks. Her eyes found mine across the chaos. The hatred there was pure, undiluted. But beneath it, I saw something else. Respect. Predator acknowledging predator. "Second floor secure," came through my earpiece. "We've got Delane." I made my way up the stairs, needing to see this. Marcus Delane, the King of Montreal, sat at his desk with his hands cuffed behind him. FBI agents were dismantling his office, carrying out boxes of evidence he'd thought he'd destroyed. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment, confusion clouded his features. Then, recognition dawned. "You," he said, voice hollow. "The analyst." I walked closer, close enough that only he could hear my response. "Agent Riley Thorne, Internal Oversight Bureau. You asked me about loyalty once. This is what it looks like." The federal agent reading him his rights paused, giving us this moment. Delane's face cycled through emotions, rage, disbelief, and finally, a bitter smile. "Who are you really?" he asked. I looked him straight in the eye. "The woman you should have been more careful before firing." As they led him away, I remained in his office, staring out at the Nevada desert. 48 hours. That's all it had taken from my termination to his arrest. In the distance, I could see more federal vehicles arriving, ready to process what would become one of the largest corporate criminal cases in Nevada history. Justice didn't always move this fast, but sometimes, when you planned it right, it moved at exactly the speed you needed. The pre-dawn darkness of Thursday morning was split by red and blue lights as the FBI convoy moved into position around Vanguard Parallax. I watched from the command vehicle as agents took their positions. The culmination of 6 months of work condensed into these critical moments. Alpha team in position, crackled through the radio. Bravo team, ready. Charlie team, standing by. The operation commander, Special Agent Martinez, checked his watch. "All teams, we are T-2 minutes. Remember, simultaneous breach on all locations. No one gets a warning call." I adjusted my bulletproof vest, the weight both foreign and familiar. While I'd spent months playing the analyst, this was who I really was, an agent trained for moments exactly like this. "Thorne, you're with the documentation team," Martinez instructed. "Once we secure the main floor, you guide them to the critical evidence locations." Through the surveillance feeds, I could see Vanguard's building, lit up like always, a 24-hour operation that never slept. Shayla's car was in the parking lot. She'd been there all night, probably destroying what she thought was evidence. Marcus had arrived an hour ago, his Bentley parked in its reserved spot like this was any other day. "All teams, we are go! Execute, execute, execute." The building erupted in controlled chaos. Flashbang grenades announced our arrival as teams breached from multiple entry points. I followed the tide of agents through the main entrance, the same doors I'd walked through as Riley the analyst, now blown open by federal force. "FBI, everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them." The night shift security scattered like roaches when the lights come on. Some hit the floor immediately, others froze in confusion. Through my earpiece, I heard reports from other teams. Residential teams report successful entry. Targets secured. IT department locked down. Subjects attempting to wipe servers stopped them mid-process. I moved with purpose through the familiar hallways, leading agents to the executive floor. The elevator ride up felt like ascending to Judgment Day. When the doors opened, we found Shayla trying to feed documents into an industrial shredder, her usually perfect appearance destroyed by panic and exhaustion. "Step away from the shredder. Hands up." She complied slowly, her eyes finding mine among the tactical team. The recognition was instant, followed by pure rage. "You fucking bitch!" she snarled as agents cuffed her. "I knew something was off about you." "Not off enough to stop me," I replied calmly. We found Marcus in his office, attempting to drill through hard drives. The drill fell from his hands as agents flooded in, weapons drawn. Unlike Shayla's rage, his face showed only calculated assessment, even now trying to find an angle. "I want my lawyer," was all he said as they cuffed him. But I wasn't done. While agents processed the scene, I guided the evidence team to the real treasures. The hidden safe behind the oil painting, exactly where my surveillance had shown him accessing it. The false bottom drawer in Shayla's desk, where she kept backup drives. The server room's secondary unit that they thought no one knew about. Jesus Christ! One of the FBI techs whistled as he accessed the hidden server. "This thing's got terabytes of data, arms shipments, financial transfers, encrypted communications." "They were paranoid enough to keep records of everything," I explained. "Insurance against their partners betraying them. They just never expected someone on the inside to use it against them." As dawn broke over Montreal, the full scope of the operation became clear. 17 locations raided simultaneously. 43 arrests. Hundreds of boxes of evidence. The local news trucks were already gathering, sensing the biggest story to hit Nevada in years. I stood in Marcus's office as they carried him out, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as federal agents led a parade of Vanguard executives to waiting vehicles. Employees who'd terrorized others for years now faced their own reckoning. Agent Thorne, Martinez appeared beside me. Thought you'd want to know. The digital forensics team cracked their main database. This thing is huge. We're looking at connections to terror cells, cartel operations, rogue military units. Vanguard wasn't just corrupt. They were a full-service criminal enterprise. Below, I saw them loading Shayla into an FBI vehicle. She looked up at the building one last time, and somehow found my silhouette in the window. Even from this distance, I could feel her hatred. Marcus emerged next. No longer the king of his domain, but just another criminal in handcuffs. The employees who'd arrived for the early shift stood in the parking lot, watching their invincible boss brought low. Some looked shocked, others seemed relieved, finally free from the culture of fear he'd cultivated. Your USB trick was brilliant, Martinez continued, making them think they'd found your insurance policy, letting them trigger the tracking themselves. They basically invited us in. They were so used to being predators, I said, still watching the scene below. They forgot what it was like to be hunted. The operation would continue for hours, cataloging evidence, interviewing witnesses, freezing accounts. But the critical phase was complete. The fortress of Vanguard Parallax had fallen in exactly 48 hours, just as I'd planned. As they drove Marcus away, I thought about his question. Who are you? I was the consequence he never saw coming. The agent who'd sat in meetings, analyzed spreadsheets, and smiled politely while documenting every crime. The one he'd dismissed as just another disposable employee. His mistake. Their downfall. We'll need you for depositions, Martinez said. This case will take years to fully prosecute. I'll be there, I promised. But for now, I just stood at the window, watching the sun rise over Montreal. Somewhere in this town, employees who'd been fired, threatened, and silenced would wake up to the news that their tormentors were in custody. Justice had come to this forgotten corner of Nevada, delivered by someone they'd thrown away like trash. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just served cold. It comes with a federal warrant and an FBI tactical team. By noon, Vanguard Parallax looked like a crime scene from a movie. Yellow tape crisscrossed doorways, FBI evidence trucks lined the parking lot, and agents in windbreakers carried out box after box of documents. The empire Marcus Delane had built over years was being dismantled in hours. I peeled off my tactical vest in the command vehicle, the adrenaline finally starting to fade. Through the monitors, I watched as local employees gathered outside the perimeter, some crying, others celebrating. For many, Vanguard had been both their lifeline and their prison. Now they were free. But freedom in a dying town like Montreal came with its own fears. Final count, Park announced, entering the vehicle. 57 arrests across all locations. We've frozen over $300 million in assets. The Attorney General's office is calling this the largest corporate criminal bust in the region's history. I nodded, but my eyes stayed on one monitor showing the interrogation room feeds. Marcus sat stone-faced with his team of expensive lawyers. Shayla had refused representation, choosing instead to rage at the camera about betrayal and loyalty. Others were already trying to cut deals. Rats fleeing the sinking ship. You should feel proud, Park said. 6 months of your life, and you brought down an entire criminal network. I just gathered evidence. The FBI did the heavy lifting. Don't sell yourself short. Without your intel, these people would still be selling weapons to terrorists and destroying lives. He paused. There's talk of a commendation, maybe even a promotion. But I wasn't thinking about medals or career advancement. I was thinking about Janet, the analyst fired for a simple email mistake, about all the employees who'd lived in fear, who'd kept quiet because they needed their jobs, about the weapons that wouldn't reach conflict zones, the money that wouldn't fund terrorism, the lives that might be saved because we'd stopped this operation. By late afternoon, the media circus was in full swing. News helicopters circled overhead while reporters interviewed shocked townspeople. The headline wrote itself. Federal raid exposes massive corruption at Nevada defense contractor. I slipped out during the chaos, driving through Montreal one last time. This place had been my home for 6 months, even if home had been a carefully constructed lie. I passed the diner where I'd eaten lonely dinners, maintaining my cover. The gym where I'd worked out at 5 a.m. before anyone else arrived. The apartment complex where Riley Thorne had lived. Now just another empty unit in a town full of them. At the city limits, I pulled over and looked back. Smoke rose from somewhere, probably Vanguard employees burning personal documents, trying to distance themselves from the scandal. By tomorrow, lawyers would descend like vultures. Some employees would flip, testifying against their bosses for immunity. Others would claim ignorance, painting themselves as victims. But Marcus and Shayla? They were done. The evidence on that USB drive, combined with what the FBI had seized, would put them away for decades. Their kingdom of fear and corruption had collapsed in exactly 48 hours. My phone buzzed. A text from Park. Transport leaving for federal processing in Denver. Delane asking for you. I almost ignored it. What more was there to say? But curiosity won. I drove back to the FBI staging area where the prisoner transport was preparing to leave. Marcus sat in the back of an armored vehicle, hands and feet shackled. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his perfect CEO veneer cracked. When he saw me, something shifted in his expression. I underestimated you, he said simply. You didn't see me at all. That was your mistake. He leaned forward as much as his restraints allowed. You know what the funny thing is? If I hadn't fired you, you would have kept gathering evidence for who knows how long. But I got paranoid, moved too fast. A bitter laugh. I handed you the victory. No, I corrected. You handed me the opportunity. The victory was already inevitable. The federal marshal signaled it was time to go. As they prepared to close the vehicle doors, Marcus called out one last time. Was any of it real? The person you pretended to be? I thought about Riley the analyst. Quiet, competent, forgettable. In a way, she'd been more real than many covers I'd worn. She'd wanted simple things, to do good work, to be left alone, to survive in a hostile environment, not so different from the real me. Real enough, I said, and walked away. The convoy pulled out as the sun set over Montreal, taking Marcus Delane and his co-conspirators to face federal justice. I stood in the empty parking lot of what had been Vanguard Parallax, now just another failed business in a town full of them. Tomorrow, the trials would begin, lawyers would argue, deals would be cut, and justice would grind forward in its slow, methodical way. I'd testify, revealing the full extent of my operation, watching as those who'd thought themselves untouchable learned otherwise. But tonight, I was just Riley Thorne, driving away from Montreal for the last time. In my rearview mirror, the lights of the town faded into darkness. Somewhere behind those lights, people were sleeping better, knowing the shadow over their lives had lifted. I'd been fired on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday night, the ones who'd fired me were in federal custody. Sometimes justice doesn't knock on the door. Sometimes it kicks the fucking door down. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and revenge, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Riley's position? Let me know in the comments.